Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us for tonight's Warringah and Wakehurst Traffic and Transport Community Forum. My name is Sean Moran. I'm the Senior Electorate Officer at Michael Regan's Electorate Office in DY, and we welcome you to a frank, positive and collaborative discussion about what can be done to solve persisting issues in our local area. Tonight's forum is, of course, co-hosted by State and Federal Independent MPs Zali Steggall, the Federal Member for Warringah, and Michael Regan, New South Wales Independent Member for Wakehurst. Our forum includes questions to our panellists based on key issues raised in the community survey, and we'll then move on to a selection of your questions that were submitted by our audience when registering your tickets tonight. For housekeeping, I'd like to point out that bathrooms are just outside the door and to your right. We have emergency exits here and in the same door you came through. We'd also like to remind you that tonight's event is being recorded for anybody that wasn't able to make it here in person. And we do have a few people in our front row that we'd like to thank for being here as well. We have Jay Zemevsky, Chief Operating Officer of Keolis Downer, Robert Bikakan, CDC, along with Ravinder Singh, Sarah Bickford, Bike Planner at Bicycle New South Wales, Sue Hines, Mayor of Northern Beaches Council, Councillor Candy Bingham and Councillor Sarah Grattan, Campbell Pfeiffer, the Acting Director of Transport and Assets at Northern Beaches Council, Carolyn Corrigan, Mayor of Mossman Council, and Michael Randall. And we also welcome Candice Wright and Mathew Lynch, Transport for New South Wales representatives. So thank you very much for being here, and thank you audience for being here as well. Let me start by introducing Zali Steggall to formally commence the forum.
Thank you, Sean, and if I might start by, of course, paying my respects to traditional elders of the land on which we meet, past, present and emerging. It's incredibly important that we acknowledge the rich cultural history we have here and that their footprint and their incredible custodianship of the land on which we meet. I think Sean forgot one piece of housekeeping, which was to put your mobile phones on silent, and I'll add that to it. And on that note of acknowledgement, I should say the Warringah office is engaging in a process of having a reconciliation action plan, and I'll be talking to Michael to make sure Wakehurst is doing one as well. But I think it is a process in terms of better engaging with our First Nations history and community. So this is a really incredible topic and really important to the community, I know. I've now been the member for Warringah for 5 years, and one of the top issues back in 2019 was in fact transport. It was one that came up pretty much every election, and there's always a sense of frustration about progressing this issue. For me, it was important. I supported the Beaches Link Tunnel done right, made submissions, engaged with the community. We had an EIS process. There was a lot going on. We've now done another survey. We did one in 2019. Of course, COVID kind of interrupted and changed some of the answers and the perspective on that. And then we've just done another survey to get a sense from the community in this post-COVID, I think, environment as people get back to the workforce and working more again in the CBD in our city centres, how our transport is operating for them, because it's such a key part to our lives and livelihoods. We know Northern Beaches is congested. The Northern Beaches is connected to the rest of Greater Sydney by 3 transport corridors: Monavale Road, Warringah Road and Military Road, Spit Road. All 3 corridors experience significant levels of congestion and long and unpredictable travel times. Residents of the Northern Beaches rely heavily on private vehicles and public buses for travel. Public transport travel times can be long and unreliable. In 2019, the Australian Infrastructure Audit ranked the North Sydney Northern Beaches corridor as the 4th most congested corridor in Sydney's evening peak periods during the 2016 assessment, and forecasts it to be the 7th most congested by 2031 as measured by total vehicle delays. There's currently 2 projects for the Northern Beaches on the Commonwealth Infrastructure Australia priority list to help alleviate these issues. And these are some of the areas that I will be asking our very special guests about tonight. That is the North Sydney to Northern Beaches capacity improvements and the Northern Beaches A8 corridor capacity Seaforth to Mona Vale. Now, we recently, as I said, conducted the Transport and Traffic Survey, and thank you to my incredible team of volunteers. You might have seen them. They were out there on bus stops and transport places getting your feedback, and we had over 700 responses. You'll see on your chairs a summary of some of the key top-line outcomes of that, and you can see public transport, which this is great while we have state powerhouses here to help us when it comes to public transport is the major concern, followed by traffic and congestion. The largest barrier to using public transport is reliability, journey times and frequency. Bus usage in Warringah is very high. Obviously, we don't have many choices. We have buses or we have ferries. Buses with 70% using a bus at least once a week and 39% of responders using the B line weekly. 91% of those surveyed support the electrification of buses, and it has been exciting to see the announcements and those buses start to be around our roads. Infrastructure for bicycles was cited as a need, and safety concerns around speed, lack of helmets and regulation were common responses in relation to e-bikes, and I do welcome the move from the Northern Beaches Council in that respect. The summary, as I said, is on your seat. So, future vision, the introduction of the B line has been a success story, but there are pinch points, and they are some of the issues we're hoping to address tonight. The other issue, of course, is the Spit Bridge. Being a member for Warringah, I do travel from Northern Beaches to Lower North Shore, and the Spit Bridge was built in 1958. So this is now a fairly dated piece of infrastructure, almost 70 years old. And I don't want to be ageist, but there is the question of, is it still fit for purpose? And these are some of the questions, especially where we know we are heavily reliant. I will ask for some respect, please. Are you okay? And that obviously we're heavily reliant on buses and ferries. We have no rail, no beaches linked tunnels, so we are here to ask for what's Plan B and what is the plan in relation to obviously our transport, our infrastructure. We have population growth, which is planned but limited by our geography and I think our infrastructure. Of course, from a federal point of view, very much welcome. We've had fuel efficiency standards passed that will incentivise cleaner vehicles, but we need to speed that up. I very much welcome that we're seeing now the electrification of the buses. So a lot more work to do. We have a number of questions you all lodged when you registered, and we will do our very best to get to that and to address many of your issues. And I'll now throw over to Michael Regan, the independent member for Wakehurst, because he and I are very focused on delivering solutions for our area. Thank you.
Thank you, Zali. And can I just say thank you to our guests here tonight, and particularly Minister Graham, who I know is knee-deep in budget stuff. We're just less than a month out from the state budget and is working overtime on that with his fellow cabinet members, and will be leaving at some stage tonight and won't be staying around, but he will be here for the majority of the evening. But it's a very big deal and for you to be here, so I appreciate that. And Dr. Marjorie O'Neill, thank you. You've been here at the initial bus task force that we did at DYRSL, which was fantastic. We're the first one on the agenda. You've been out to the bus depot with myself a few times out at Brookvale, and we appreciate your continued efforts. I know the drivers do too. I wanted to quickly just let you know what I've been doing, apart from listening and trying to respond on Facebook as often as I can and to manage the expectations. I am an actual bus user. I get the B1 from DY to Parliament when we're sitting. I get it home late at night, sometimes early in the morning, and certainly I always use it to go to the SCG and get the tram as well. It is my second favourite, well, actually it's my favourite place, to be honest, the SCG. Look, we've been working with government since day one, and I've been a complete pest to Joe Halen, the Minister, and to John Graham. Marjorie, I've been a complete pest with her and the actual staff at Transport for New South Wales, but there's multiple issues. And what's been pleasing is that, and what I want to quietly explain and just to understand is our Northern Beaches, the peninsula is broken up into two regions, and so Forest Coaches services one region down the spine of Forest Way into the Chatswood and sometimes to the city predominantly, and other areas I'm aware, but certainly, and then you've got the one down Military Road and Pittwater Road into the city, which is Kelios, depending on who you speak to, and they've had their own issues, and coming into the election, we had a lot of issues with queues, bus driver shortage, and other issues to deal with, and we've been dealing with those methodically, and I've been a regular on the phone to both Forest and CDC who've been receptive, and I thank my staff for what they're doing as well, who take your calls, your emails, and try and respond as quickly as we can and get answers to your questions, and Transport for New South Wales have been good at giving us the data. So I wanted to let you know that when I hear, and Nick Leach is in the room who's sending us good updates from Killarney, because we've had to recently cancel. When I say we, the CDC cancelled a route in the mornings recently because of the driver shortage. They continue to struggle to get drivers. It is a problem across the whole state, not just here, and everything is being done to address it. So one of the data showed that there was to basically cancel one route in Killarney to the city was to then start more buses at Forest Way to the city would help alleviate that, but then you get compounded with sick leave and other issues which just you can't avoid. So it's unfortunately exacerbated a problem. We sort of started to see getting kind of back on top. It wasn't satisfactory to Killarney residents, but there are some drivers in training which are about 4 or 5 months away from being on those routes and returning that service. And talking to one lady tonight, when I was in Killarney, or when I had my house at Forestville and used to catch those services to the city at corner of Cannons Parade and Starkey Street, we know there was more services previously than what there have been recently, and even less now. So we need to return to what it was. We're across all that. We're working very much on the basic issue of housing. It is just impossible for drivers on their wage to live on the Northern Beaches. Again, there's a high school site, Forest High School, which will be vacant halfway through next year, which is zoned for 1,000 units on it. And I want all 1,000 units to be affordable in perpetuity and available for anyone to purchase. I want the shared equity model that governments have. I want to see, because we're also seeing a teacher shortage, and we're seeing school students, 2 and 3 classes being taught by one teacher on the Oval. And that's just because teachers can't live here. 2 Year 12 students approached me on behalf of their cohort from Killarney saying they've just lost 2 teachers because they were tired from driving down to Newcastle to Killarney and back every day. Can't blame them. And then you've got the drivers who are on their 12-hour shifts, 4 hours on, 4 hours off, 4 hours on, and being paid, I think it's $32, $34 an hour. Yes, it suits some, doesn't suit others, and there's a whole thing, the bus task force, and Marjorie may touch on it, that they're trying to work to. And as an MP, an independent MP, we're working on things like wages and conditions to make sure they're not missed out, they're not left behind like other things. So we're in there trying to make sure those things happen because it all impacts the driver shortage and the experience for us, the customer. So we're not going to rest until we get those types of things done. We're looking at other alternatives, which I'll touch on briefly, but certainly I just wanted you to understand the constant thing, and I mentioned Nick because Nick's right when he says you see so many buses to Chatswood going down Warringah Road, if you stand at Jamison Square at Forestville, and he's not the only person to say this, but it's because of the two regions. You have one, you have Kelios coming down from Warringah Road with Chatswood buses that then go past Jamison Square at Forestville, and then you have buses coming down Forest Way from Forest Coaches that turn onto Warringah Road and go past the same thing. So you're always going to see more buses. If it was as easy as just turning a few off and stopping them, it would have happened by now. We know those issues exist. There's maybe some longer term solutions to that. I'm not even going to pretend to know the operations. That's for the guys who run the buses and who the contracts are with. But we need to address it because it is a visible problem and we share your frustrations. And I think one lady was telling me today took her 2 hours to get to work. And that's not cool. So, conversely, Kelios was just named this week as one of the high-performing companies on time, and they've now reached, I think, 95% of it, I think, was one that would equal first or second, and which was good, but they're now they're at capacity with their B-lines. We introduced, I think it was 167 services, additional city B-line services, which is great because everyone's using it, but it's at running at capacity. So if you're at Manly Vale, Brookvale, it's pretty hard to get on. So we're aware of that. They're starting services down at DY and Brookvale, I think, now as well, to try and make sure they're not missing out. So those things are doable. They're listening. We're actioning them. So thank you for that. In relation to, I was just going to say, the electrification, Zali just mentioned, we've been pushing hard for that to be rolled. I think we're the first depot in the state to be fully rolled out as electric across this year. And next year we start taking delivery of those buses, the single-deck buses. And the other announcement was, I think they're going to be being built in New South Wales and Macquarie Park, and I think they'll be the next ones off the cab. So you'll start to see the electric buses roll out through our suburbs, which will be a pleasant thing if you're living outside a bus stop or on a main road, because they are noisy. So there's another question I'm always asked, and I'm sure we'll be asked again tonight, and someone might go into more detail. Why aren't we pushing for a metro? That's an interesting one, but I just want you to know a metro is fine, a metro station, but you're looking at 25,000 dwellings per station. Now, there are 330 dwellings at Meriton Apartments on the corner there of Howard Avenue and St David's. That's 330 dwellings in an 18-storey and a 15-storey building. If you want 25,000, do the sums in your head, and that's what it takes to get the numbers to stack up, apparently, according to the economists, to have a metro station and to have it built. So, for various reasons. So I just want you to think about that, and if something that you want us to push for, that's fine. We're politicians and that's what we can do, but you've got to understand the physics. They won't just do it because we think we're at capacity now. No, you need to be like the eastern suburbs or the inner west if you want to get that, or Bondi, So that's what you've got to be very mindful of, and do you want that for our area? You are getting 2,000 dwellings around the hospital over the next 5 years. 1,000 of those will be at one site, which is the Frenchs Forest High School. It will also have retail and commercial space as well on top of that, and it will be, and the X160 bus that you get now, that will become more or less a B-line service, and is designed to become a B-line service, I should say, so every few minutes, which is good, bad. And then do we have to start looking at transit lanes or bus lanes down Warringah Road over the Roseville Bridge? Maybe. So that's the kind of stuff you need to think about and talk about with us, and how we move forward. And we do this, we've got to do it with the community together. So we haven't sat idle, we're doing this together, we're working, we've got the Minister here, we've got the Parliamentary Secretary for Transport here who's been here before, and we're very grateful to have. But I wanted to be very clear about some of those things that I'm constantly asked and I constantly see on Facebook, and I want to hear what you think about that. So don't be shy. I'm only going to tell you what I know, and so therefore don't be shy. Trackless trams is something I'm working on, because one trackless tram it's in concept, it's actually in operation in other parts of the world, but it's one driver per 2 buses. So the capacity of 2 buses on one trackless tram, so it only has one driver. If we've got a bus driver shortage, maybe we need to rethink the way we configure our bus stations, our bus stops going forward. Maybe we need to think about how we do that. So that could be an investment, something we need to think about and prioritise. Because I don't think the bus driver shortage is going to go away anytime soon. And I think it could be rolled out statewide. We're working on housing priorities. We're working on, I said, the Frenchs Forest. We've got Narrowena we're looking at to maximise the potential of some of the public housing that's there and what could be. We're working on with Council on the A8 corridor, which is that main one there, which is things like grade separation, which is what you see outside the hospital at Brookvale, outside Office Works there, where Warringah Road and Pittwater Road meet, how we can do the grade separation. It has the most positive impact on traffic in general on the northern beaches, on traffic flows. So that's why we're pushing quite hard for the study on that to be done, the planning for it to be done, so that in the future it can be funded quickly when the feds can cough up the money. Hi, Zali. New options we're looking at. Kia Ride On Demand has been hugely successful, the on-demand stuff in Mona Vale, Warriewood. Why can't we have that in Collaroy, Wheeler Heights, Forest, Frenchs Forest, etc.? Why can't we? We've made it Manly get rid of the hop, skip and jump bus, Sarah. No. Just kidding. But the Kia ride works, and it's a great success story, and why can't we get that through the rest of the suburbs? And very sincerely, why can't we? And I think that needs to be something we looked at. I've put it in my budget submission for a pilot through at least one area of ours to demonstrate to the government you would use it and it would be supported. So we're hoping to see that, and if we don't, we'll keep pushing for it because it does work and it can be very, very positive for everything. There's a whole bunch of others. So we're working on the bus drivers, the wages, the conditions for them, e-bikes, active transport. Stella Maris do a great thing. You can't ride an e-bike to their school unless you've done your driver's licence L-plate test twice and passed it. And if you go to McKellar Girls, there are hundreds of those e-bikes there. But they're the new P-plate, right? Like they give you freedom like you've had not before. You can go anywhere you want as a 12-year-old, which we used to have to wait till you were 17 before you got your P-plates. Now you've got an e-bike, you can go anywhere. And they're very popular, but we've got to build that knowledge. So we're working with the state government very proactively about how to manage that and bring that forward. So we need regulations, we need to protect pedestrians, we need separated cycle lanes. We've got to get on with doing this. And I know councillors are doing their best to look at that and manage it, so thank you for what you're doing. I'm going to leave it there because there is a lot we're doing and can do, and we want to hear from you. And we've got some questions for our panel to start with, and then we've got some prepared questions from the audience that you've raised with us. So I'm going to throw to Zali, but I just want to thank you all for coming out tonight. And we're missing the Swans match that's live at the moment, so I want to get out. Just kidding. Over to you, Zali.
Thank you, Michael. So, as you've heard, traffic congestion is a major concern for many residents, and I think it's bringing a lot of you here tonight, including the notorious Spit Bridge and Officeworks DY intersection. So, I guess my first question is to Minister Graham, and thank you very much for making the time to come here. With the Beaches Link Tunnel project officially cancelled, and I should say for everybody, it was shelved by the Perrottet government. It was put on hold, and now the Minns government has made that more permanent by cancelling it. Obviously, a big concern for us is then what alternate infrastructure projects are being planned to alleviate traffic in the Northern Beaches and the Lower North Shore, because, as I said, nearly 70-year-old, that piece of infrastructure, and there are concerns in the community of how we are going to cope. Minister.
Yeah, no, fantastic. And firstly, great to be here, and also to see this many people here out tonight, a real indication about how important these issues are to any community, but especially to this community, given some of the challenges about moving around. I was really happy to be here, partly because of the positive engagements I've had, especially with Michael in the State Parliament, but also Zali and Team Zali raising some of the issues. I was very keen to be along to continue the discussion. I wouldn't have called Michael a pest, but now that he's gone and done it, I can confirm that since day one, he's been very active in pressing these issues. So it really has been a very active discussion from my point of view. As a new minister coming in, finding some budget surprises along the way as we're grappling with what it means to be a new government trying to deal with transport issues in Sydney. The key thing following those decisions, and Zali, you've characterised it entirely correctly there, is we're really looking right across the network, doing an assessment about what is the best way to tackle this in the post, since that decision. It is also true people's travel patterns have changed after COVID. People are living and working differently, which means we really have to examine how that's working now across these areas. Transport's doing that work. I want to recognise both Candice and Mathew, who are here tonight as well from Transport, to hear what people have got to say. That work we're expecting will come through in the second half of 2024. It's really comprehensive, so it'll look at all the key roads across the Northern Beaches. It'll look at Spit Road, Military Road, Pittwater Road, the Pacific Highway, the Eastern Valley Way and Warringah Road. We're particularly focusing in at the Spit Bridge. You know, I don't need to tell anyone here what a challenge it is, but also on Pittwater Road, that Officeworks site, which is a real choke point. So there's some of the places that'll be carefully looked at. That'll examine how people are actually moving around now, post-COVID. What are the complex set of solutions that we can apply to really improve things? Some of that will be focused on roads, and that's my focus. But I really want to acknowledge how difficult some of the public transport issues have been, and Michael's really touched on them, given the problems we've had across the city with bus driver shortages. That's a problem everywhere, and Marge will touch on what's happening with it. But it's hit here hardest because of those challenges about housing, about the commute times for the workers to then move everyone here around. So I think that's at the forefront of my mind. The discussions we're having are really focused on what are the levers we can do to make sure we do have more bus drivers signing up to work and signing up to work here because of the impact it's had on people locally.
So, Minister, obviously it's that when it comes to infrastructure, it is that intersection between state government and federal government and funding, and I'm quite a pest for the federal infrastructure minister as well. And so I guess from my point of view, and this might need to be a question that you take on notice, I appreciate that, but in relation to that Infrastructure Australia priority list when it comes to those projects, obviously very keen interest when I look at those two projects that are listed, the North Sydney to Northern Beaches Capacity Improvements Project, and in particular because the New South Wales Government is a proponent on that one. And I guess my question is it the plan that it will stay on the infrastructure priority list, because that does require submission from New South Wales Government to federal to maintain it as a priority project? Of course, I will be putting in my submission, but is there any update of work underway in relation to the business case or plans, or is that dependent on the outcome of that review?
Yeah, look, it's a really good question because those works in some ways are even more important now. It'll be shaped by this review. This is exactly what we'll look at, so that the way we deal with that into the federal sphere will be shaped by this review. There's been some well publicised issues where we've said we expect more support from the federal government. I mean, there are two Labor governments, but we have not held back from saying we expect a better deal for New South Wales. Pleasingly, in the federal budget, we've seen some more money flow in to infrastructure in New South Wales. So that's meant we've got a little bit more room to move, but it'll be shaped by this review.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Zali. Thanks, Minister. Marjorie, Dr O'Neill, as it says on my notes here. You can see the concern we have here from our residents about the public transport and its reliability, and what steps are being considered, what things have come out of the bus task force. Can you tell us and elaborate, and what do you hope comes out of it? Because I know there's a lot happening behind the scenes. I know the report's probably finished and on someone's desk, but you're going through. I might not be finished, by the way, but can you just elaborate on that and just tell us what the bus task force is doing?
Yeah, so really, really good question. And I want to say I feel your pain. I come from a community that's not too dissimilar to yours, where we have felt the exact same issues around bus driver shortages interlinked with the cost of living. So I just want to say you've got someone who is living and breathing what your experience is as well. As Michael pointed out earlier, this region was one of the first in which we did our bus passenger forums on the 28th of June, and I want to thank everyone that has turned out and participated as part of those forums as well. So as background, the task force has been statewide, and because it has been, not since the Unsworth Review, which was 25 years ago, has there been a comprehensive study of our bus services in this state. Right, where we have gone out and engaged with industry, with bus drivers and with passengers about the public transport. And so one of our recommendations coming out about this is the need for ongoing engagement with passengers and with communities to make sure that public transport is fit for purpose and that it actually looks and feels the way that our communities need for it to be. So far, 2 reports have come out. The first report really focused on bus driver shortages as well as safety, and 7 of those recommendations we have accepted in principle. That was things like making sure that there is growth put into the budget, like growth transport put into budget. People might be shocked. Actually, one of the things the last government did was remove growth funding from the budget. So as our communities grow, there wasn't that funding in there for our public transport systems to grow. So that's one of the principles that we want to put back in, and I think that's one of the things that's been discussed here. Communities are growing and changing, and we want to make sure that there are budgets there to be able to suit that. We want to address the reliability, the on-time running, and the efficiency and effectiveness. Things like your ghost buses on your apps, that is because of a failure in the investment in P-tips. So we're investing in that as well to make sure that when you look at an app, that bus that is there, it actually turns up, right? So you can actually make those decisions. The second report that came out really dealt with the neglect of investment. Buses do 40% of the heavy lifting of transport in our state, and they only get 3% of the investment. I love buses, and they're actually the best bang for your buck in terms of getting mass rollout of things. And so that's one of the other things we're looking at, and I think there'll be things to come with the budget. And again, Michael, your advocacy in this space, I wouldn't call you a pest, I'd call you an advocate.
I know my place.
Okay. Now, the passenger forums, though, and the feedback from them, that's imminently coming out. That report is currently, from all reports, sitting on the Minister's desk. I know around here, increased services as well as the efficiency and on-time running of services to the city, and there are particular suburbs that have been neglected with that. Better school services as well. And again, the bus driver shortage still links into this, and I think I've got another question coming up which is around bus driver shortages, so I can go into a lot more detail around what we're doing to address that. But a lot is happening. I think we need to be upfront with people. These things can't be fixed overnight, but we want to make sure that we're working with communities across New South Wales, including yours, to make sure that we can fix these problems together and that we're designing public transport and a bus network that you will use that caters to your needs.
Thanks, Marjorie. I think too it's important that the tech thing is explained, because the technology is 3G technology, and then it's with a whole bunch of different companies with different platforms trying to speak to a government platform which doesn't talk to that platform on 4G or 3G. And it's a complete nightmare. No one's invested any money. It's when we get sent screenshots of these cancelled services, they never existed in the first place. So they weren't even cancelled. And that's the ghost bus thing. And so it's hard to explain to the general public, but it's an absolute debacle. And I relied on it until I got told by the minister, don't. And then some of the bus guys told me don't, because it's just not reliable. But there's that. And there's also the infrastructure we have. We're fortunate enough to have, if you're on the Pittwater Road side with the B line, you get the on time, you get the electronic boards and the like, which are very beneficial for the customer experience. And I know the bus task force has asked for that to be rolled out across the metro, and we're pushing very hard for Warringah Road and Forest Way to get prioritised for that, because that does give real-time information and has been very beneficial. But we have to sort out the disaster that is Wynyard Station, particularly coming home in the afternoon. It is an effing nightmare. Even late at night, at midnight, I can assure you, it's not as bad, obviously, but it is ridiculous, and it's another problem we've inherited. But yeah, and we've got some solutions and things to put forward, but we just need a longer term plan for that. And I just think it's important that people hear that you recognise that, yeah. But it is an issue. We all see it, we all experience it. Some worse than others. And Thursday is the new Friday, right? Like for public transport. To your point, John, about we're moving differently now. But yeah.
Thank you. So next, we're going to let's talk about maybe some remedies, right? We've got a lot of issues and problems, and obviously you're looking at a lot of areas. But Mathew Hounsell, who's the Senior Research Consultant, Transport Research Centre at UTS, he's an expert, so he's sitting outside of maybe the bubble and can give us a bit of an assessment when it comes to what are the primary factors contributing to the current transport issues in this area. And how will for example, the new metro from Chatswood help our constituents get to or from the city once it's opened? And what is the feasibility of an east-west B2 bus route?
Just a small question. Okay, so unfortunately for the Northern Beaches, your primary inhibitor is your geography. And nothing we can do as transport planners can ever overcome geography. And the second thing we can never overcome is land use. So low density housing on plateaus is hard to service. Unfortunately, that's always going to be a problem. But you do have, and we're built around major transport corridors. The Military Road, Pittwater Road were tramways. So that's why you have the density you have here. In the suburbs, there's a lot of medium density housing, a lot of walk-ups, and they help build patronage and keep people moving. But one of the things we forget is, and the Parliamentary Secretary is right to say, I was about to call you the Assisting Minister, is right to say buses do, a large chunk of the lifting in Sydney, and they're not sexy, and they didn't get investment under many previous governments. And I was standing under the B-Way interchange at Warringah Mall waiting for the next bus, going, why isn't this around the rest of the city? So the Unsworth Review asked for a lot of these changes a long time ago, and they just haven't been implemented because the community isn't screaming for them. It's always that old thing in politics, whether the Premier says, force me to do this. I can't do it if everyone is sitting silently. So one of the big problems we have with transport is that the fundamental equation is that the number of services, the number of buses, the number of drivers required is determined by the time it takes to go, say, from the city to DY and back, divided by the number of minutes between the services. So every single minute that a bus is sitting behind a car is costing you money, is slowing your service. I've got a bad dodgy mic. Is slowing your services down. It's making it harder to provide the services for you. So bus queue jump lanes, changing the traffic lights to give buses priority, because the PTIP system only gives you priority if the bus is determined to be late, not if the bus is running slow. So changing those things, getting people to see buses as a way of keeping other people moving so that those who need to travel by car, those who need to travel by car, those who have no choice, can use the roads. Because the Moggridge principle is quite simple. The speed at which the road network moves is determined by the speed at which the public transport network moves, because that, if the public transport network is faster, people will use it. And that's just the fundamental thing. Better public transport means better roads. And that also then means also looking at active transport, because if we can get people to cycle to the shops, then that means that there's less cars, there's less space taken, and more space for other people. And there is also just the insular-peninsula factor. If you look at the census data, a lot of people live and work in the Northern Beaches. And those links are important, but services in the area are also important.
What about the metro? We understand the metro is due to open in August, and some of the figures I've heard coming out of transports, I don't think I'm telling anything that's not a state secret, but it's going to potentially save 20 minutes on your trip to the city from Forestville. By going Forestville to Chatswood, getting off, jumping on a metro, you'll be at Martin Place 20 minutes quicker. Yes, there was always an issue with the strategic travel model in Sydney. It was developed by the Institute of Transport and Logistics Studies at the University of Sydney, and it had a very, very, very high, unreasonably high transfer penalty. So there was an expectation that nobody in Sydney wanted to transfer. But when you have a very fast metro, because the Sydney Metro has been designed to move very quickly, that means now you can save a lot of time because you're not sitting in a bus on Military Road like I was this evening, just waiting for all these other people going home. Most of the traffic on Military Road comes from Mossman, Neutral Bay, Cremorne,
the area around that road, because the fundamental fact of road traffic is people who are nearer to their destination are more likely to drive because it's not as much trouble. And so they get in the way of the people who are travelling longer distances. And that's why you see the majority of trips in the city are less than 5Ks. And so when the metro opens, it will transform the city. We don't know how it will transform the city because people change their behaviours and then we go, oh, that's interesting, they did that. But definitely for a lot of the people on the North Shore, not the northern beaches, but the North Shore, they will be very attracted to that metro, and that may actually remove a lot of people from the cars in those areas, making it easier for people on the northern beaches to drive through, which may make your traffic worse. We will have to find out in about 6 months.
Or better, hopefully.
Oh, sorry, that's me. So, Minister Graham, Wakehurst Parkway, Mona Vale Road, our favourite roads on Northern Beaches. Favourite roads. One built below sea level in the war, and anyway. Wakehurst Parkway, it is finally being dealt with by both New South Wales Government and Council, but it is a 2 to 3 year project that has, I can at least say, has begun in earnest, physically has begun. Can you give us a bit of an update on that, and also what residents can, when residents could expect some action on Mona Vale Road restoration, given stage 1 was done and completed, kind of, and when we might be able to see stage 2 done, given it is quite a serious accident hazard?
Yeah, well, happy to jump into those. I do think that it's fascinating to hear how Mathew, as a transport expert, talks about those. How those fundamentals work. I just want to reinforce that point about the metro. I don't think we will know the impact it'll have until things settle down. But the thing I found really surprising when I was briefed is just how fast those trains are.
Yeah.
It is a lot faster than the heavy rail networks. That's one of the reasons to take that point that Mathew's made very, very seriously. It may be one of the things that starts to move things around here.
Yeah, well, they're talking 20 minutes saving. Like, that's big. Like, if you're getting the city every day, getting through Castle Craig and through those suburbs to finally get onto the freeway is a nightmare.
Yeah, but we genuinely won't know, because it's about how thousands of other people decide to move around the city, and it does take a little while to settle in. The Wakehurst Parkway, a couple of different things to say. There's 2 lots of work going on. This was one of the first things that Michael was raising with me. The flood mitigation works really just as this gets cut off whenever there's water about, and there's been a lot of water in Sydney, as everyone knows, has been a top priority. There's been now $31.1 million allocated to it. We committed some more before the election because it was such a compelling case. The thing that's been great about the way that's unfolding is, and this, you have been a big help on this, is getting the council and the state government to work better together. So there's actually joint delivery now of this, of some of this work, and that just means it's operating a lot faster. We'll get a much better result for that that money. There's more work to come though. $75 million also to look at broader safety and capacity works on that. That is due to commence early 2025. So this flood mitigation work is first, and then more work to come as that follows. So I know how important it is, but I think it's taken a little while to have those discussions, but I think that'll prove well worthwhile.
You've actually got workers out there now.
Yep.
So they're out there till end of June, and then they'll start doing some other stuff.
Yep.
If I could switch over to e-bikes and transport, to Mathew and Dr O'Neill. In the local survey, active transport modes like cycling and walking have been identified as areas needing improvement, particularly the safety risk in terms of not having separate bike lanes, e-bikes. Obviously, Northern Beaches Council has taken some steps. What, in your view, can be done to make e-bikes safer for riders and pedestrians? I might start with you, Dr. O'Neill, and then I'll go to Mathew.
Yeah, and it's a really good question. And I think like active transport has often been sort of one of the forgotten modes. So firstly, I think we just make it clear it's something that we're very passionate about and committed to. And in the last budget, we committed an additional $60 million to the budget for active transport. And we also, part of that was $10 million for active transport for schools. So we're really focused on working with councils around identifying safer routes for kids to be able to get to schools in particular. So whether it's separated cycleways, widening footpaths, fixing sort of, intersections, that money is there for councils to be able to apply for so they can work on the routes that suit them. As someone who has a background in local government with local roads, knowing local councils are actually the best to determine where those things are to be able to set the priorities. But then when you're talking about e-bikes, there's two parts to it. There's enforcement, and I think enforcement is incredibly important. And we know that the police are the main proponents that need to enforce, but there is a huge education piece, and we're working on that. We're specifically, it'll be out soon, and we're specifically going to be targeting grade 7 and grade 8 students with that, so that we can better educate young people on the use of these e-bikes as well. I think it's great that we've got young people using them, getting out, choosing to have them. It gives them independence, but they need to be educated on them, how to use them. I love this idea about the ELS test and passing that. I think that's phenomenal. I'd like to hear more about it and like see how we
Happy
can...
to share it with
you. But also as well, like we welcome your ideas around this. These are problems that are going to which really need all of community solutions. But as I said, enforcement is a big part of it, but education is fundamental.
Absolutely.
So one of the issues you see out in the western suburbs is the house with the 4 cars out front. And it's mum, dad and the 2 kids, all of which you have to have a car to get anywhere. So what the research shows is that an e-bike changes the normal range that people will cycle from 5 kilometres up to about 15. So 15 kilometres is the distance from Sydney to well past Parramatta. Not to Parramatta, to Lidcombe. So that's a very long way. For a long way for people to cycle. So the 15k e-bike thing, especially with assist on the hills, means that people actually stop buying cars. So you've seen this in other places like Colorado, where they've offered subsidies for e-bikes. You've actually seen a drop in the number of people using cars. The fundamental issue we have in Australia is our standards are wrong, and our safety standards for traffic are not as good as they could be. The Dutch standards are so much better, and a lot of the work in the United States and the French and even the English, who are right now building cycle highways across London, have shown that if you build separated cycleways, people use them. So the other thing is to make low traffic neighbourhoods, which we have actually had in Australia for many, many decades. And that's just a matter of traffic diversions, where the cars can't go straight, but the bikes can. And that just means then that people stop doing rat runs, and you see that people on bikes start using the back streets. No one wants to ride on the footpath because it's a pain in the backside dodging people. But people will not ride on the roads if they feel that they're going to be run over by a yank tank, like those ginormous vehicles, and that's why people cycle on the footpath. I've actually gone cycling with my mates who are terrified to ride on the road. I'm a bit more brazen, but they want to ride on the footpath because they don't feel safe. What we see in the transport literature is we call women the indicator species of cycling. If a woman and her children aren't riding around like it's a normal part of their everyday life, then your roads are not safe. And I have watched a woman absolutely terrified at the idea, the movement of her child towards the main road. She was just absolutely horrified by this. She grabbed him with such fear in her eyes. And that is because Even these main roads in the inner west of Newtown, which should be quite small, are not designed for safety.
Thank you. And we've actually got Sarah Bigford here from Bicycle New South Wales. Where is Sarah? I can,
Not really.
add the perspective.
Yes, okay. Now, hi everybody. So Bicycle New South Wales is a grassroots membership organisation. We represent everyday riders who want to get around safely. And there's about 400 members in the Warringah area, and I'm one of them because I'm a local resident too. So we recognise all the concerns about e-bikes, of course, and supporting Northern Beaches Council quite closely in the last few weeks with helping launch the e-bike code campaign, which is fantastic, and it's got great media traction, and it's good work. So thanks, guys. And developing educational materials to work to send to schools. Also, we're drafting a position statement outlining important steps that all levels of government could take to improve e-bike regulation. So we're working with stakeholders to try and refine that, understand if there's possibly a new category that could be introduced to take up some of the bikes which at the moment are being ridden that are illegal. The cat's out of the bag. These bikes are amazing, but there's issues with regulation and batteries. So there's two things. E-bikes are amazing, and they should be, and could be, and must be a big part of efforts to decarbonise transport and unclog our roads. So, and in this area, there's been a boom, and it's fantastic to see so many people riding around, avoiding the hassles of parking, reducing congestion, reducing pollution. And we're particularly excited by the teenagers on bikes. And I know there's concerns with safety, but it's amazing. Today I was at McKellar Girls High, and I counted 93 bikes on the campus. 3 years ago, there were only 4 or 5. My daughter was embarrassed to ride her bike to school because nobody else did. And I think that's actually an 8.5% mode share. But because most of these bikes take passengers, there's actually a lot more than 8.5% of kids riding to that school now. So this is a really important life stage for forming travel habits. And this current surge in bike riding offers great opportunities for all levels of government to embed bikers best in young minds and shape mode choice for the future. So, of course, key to this is better infrastructure. 70% of people say they would ride more if they felt safe. Of course, part of the reason why McKellar is such a stellar school for bike riding at the moment is because it has bike paths all around it. It's a centre of quite a great network, actually. But what we need is committing to that everywhere. And separated bike paths have finally come into this area. So thanks again, Northern Beaches Council, for supporting that. And these are important on busier roads. But we also advocate for low speed limits, ideally 30 kilometres an hour, as recommended by the UN, on residential streets, in town centres and around schools. This allows most bike riders to share the roads with cars and makes every street a cycle street, in conjunction with traffic filtering to reduce traffic volumes. Walking also becomes more comfortable. The 30 kilometre zone in Manly has been successful and should be expanded without delay. None of this costs much. The speed limits cost almost nothing. So, let's get on with it. But more investment is critical. So the New South Wales government budget has allocated money to active transport, but it's still only 0.2% of the budget, of the transport budget. This is, the UN recommends 20%. So, there's a long way to go. It doesn't mean more money, it means reallocating money and spending it differently and more productively. The federal government has just announced a new active transport infrastructure fund, and that's great news. But it's $100 million over 4 years, and that's just $1 per person per year in Australia. It's not a lot. So it's a start, but please, Zali and Michael, as our representatives, please can you advocate for more? And there are 2 ideas we just want to bring up tonight. First of all, subsidies for EVs with 2 wheels. That's still not happening, and we keep asking for it, and it makes so much sense. And there's examples from all around the world where e-bikes have been subsidised, and it's made a huge difference to mode shift. Colorado is a great example, but there's other places too. And also, we would like to see Northern Beaches trial bike racks on the front of buses. This is something that's standard in Canberra, it's standard in parts of Victoria. The New South Wales government tried it for about 3 weeks in Goa and Yass a few years ago and then stopped. And we think Northern Beaches, as an area with no trains, could really benefit from that, to give people a multimodal options to get around, to allow you to take your bike on the bus to the ferry, and then once you're on the ferry, you're in the city, and then you can get across the whole city without driving. So we would welcome the opportunity to discuss that with the bus companies and to see if we can maybe trial it on the 199, the 141 up to Belrose and the bike parks up there. So that's thank you.
Thank you.
And bike parking. To the Mayor, that is a big problem with Waverley Council. They built these wonderful separated cycleways and like 3 bike parks, and they're always full.
How's my one at Dewey Beach going that I've been asking for 10 years? It's coming, is it? Yeah, so it's Christmas. And another year, another decade. Marjorie, you've heard, you touched on before the driver shortage. Can you tell us what the government's doing to address that shortage and what strategies you've got in place and what you're thinking of doing?
Yeah, so we've done quite a few things that have been helping, but there's still much more that we need to be doing. I think the big thing that you touched on earlier is the thing around affordable housing and making sure that there are homes close to where people live, close to where people work, and that's a bit more of a complex and longer term issue that we need to be addressing. But after the first report came out, the 3 things that we did, and we know that they did have an impact. One, we waived the application fee of $70, and we've seen there has been an uptake of people doing it. We ran a very targeted bus recruitment campaign, and also what we have now done is we've given Opal cards back to bus drivers. The feedback that we've been having from the bus drivers so far is positive about these 3 things. We meet people constantly who say, I've become a bus driver because the waiving of the application fee, and they're very thankful for the Opal cards. But there is still a lot more to do. There's a lot more to do around their wages and conditions. We're going through and looking at things like their infrastructure at their bus layovers as well, particularly to make them more attractive for women. There's things like making sure people have access to toilets and their brake stops. So some of these sort of IR things are a little bit more complicated, but we are working on getting them as well because we want to make sure that these are attractive jobs that attract and retain these workers.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And we do have Jay from Kellis Downer, and maybe you would like to contribute a little bit. I don't know where. Oh.
That's fine. Yeah, chuck me the mic. We'll just settle this one. It's Keolis Downer. I don't know where Keolis comes from, but that's okay. Listen, I just add a couple of things, and it's great that it's a discussion point tonight, and thanks for inviting us along. I think there's some shared interests here, and I acknowledge all our bus driver colleagues in the room. Great to see them here tonight, especially some of our trainers. But in terms of what the customers and the drivers might have in common, and you touched upon it, Marjorie, but it's also the on-road infrastructure. So to make a bus driver's life easier, to speed up the running times, you need big, beautiful, bright red bus lanes. And to touch, as you say, Mathew, buses aren't sexy. I don't know why. I was thinking earlier on about how I started my career cleaning up buses on a Saturday night down at Brookvale Bus Depot, and you're right, that's probably not that attractive, but I think we can really, get some common interests here. Big bus lanes, it'll increase frequency, increase capacity, and from a bus driver's point of view, if they're pulling at a nice big wide open bus stops, it helps the members of our community who need good accessibility. So I think there's some misalignment amongst the state and federal governments. I only found out last week that the federal government was going to remove incentives around bus driver traineeships, despite acknowledging there was a national bus driver shortage. So I don't really know. We're making representations in that regard, but that seems to be at odds with what we're experiencing at the moment. So, it's a really unfortunate situation where I've got my colleagues here from Comfortdale Grow as well, and we're sort of resorting to paying for sign-on bonuses and all sorts of interesting things to try and attract bus drivers, and we'd love to move away from that and actually have people want to take it up as a genuine career, which I personally know it is. So I think last comment I'd make too, who would have thought getting nice brand new assets, double-deckers, high capacity, high frequency, and trying to make it as streamlined a trip as possible would be so attractive. So certainly whatever we can do to bring more double-deckers onto the peninsula would be a great idea, and we need to continue to invest in what's probably the most successful bus service in Australia. Thanks, guys.
We knew it would be successful, mate. That's why we pushed for it back in 2009, 10, 11 till we got it, didn't we, Carolyn? Mayor. But just one thing on that is anyone from Connect Sydney here? Because if you are, we'd really like you to fix the potholes along those red bump lanes. Those roads are atrocious. John, you need to talk to them. You get your kidneys get changed on the one trip from DY through to the city. It is extraordinary, those red lanes. They just are not maintained. There must be a fair maintenance bill on that, I reckon, too. And I just want to re-emphasise, whilst you're both here and you're in Cabinet, I'm not sure if you've adopted your policy of 30% affordable housing on government-owned properties. I genuinely want to say again, in front of the audience, you have an opportunity here at Frenchs Forest High School, 1,000 units, 300 of those as a minimum could be, as per the policy you took to the election, be affordable and be in perpetuity for bus drivers, for teachers, for cooks, cleaners, nurses, police, everything that we've got a shortage of in this area. It needs to happen. So we can make it happen.
Yeah, no, and I think the chance to address some of those fundamental issues that are key to actually, I mean, these things are all related. The housing, the transport, people being able to afford to live and move around, of course they're related.
Yeah, thanks. Sally, I think that's over to you now.
Well, I guess it's a bit of a follow-on from that question. When I look at it from the federal point of view and that infrastructure priority list, we have got the project where the proponent is Northern Beaches Council, and we've got Sue Hines here and many councillors. In relation to that North Sydney, Northern Beaches corridor, and so in terms of your review or the state government's, I guess, focus on this area, what capacity improvements can we hope to get, or is the government looking at in relation to that Northern Beaches A8 corridor capacity? So Seaforth to Mona Vale, which was put forward by the Northern Beaches Council, it does interrelate with that DY Office Works kind of interchange question. These are sort of the bigger infrastructure questions that many, I think, in the community would like a bit more indication on.
Yeah, no, which is exactly fair, which is why we're doing this work. And the thing I think in that discussion we've had today, you can hear a couple things going on. I think everyone knows, and we were talking about the fact that people's work and travel habits have changed after COVID. But another thing's happened as well, which is transport's changing for the first time really in 100 years. Transport's pretty much been the same, the way people move around a city for the last century, but it is now starting to shift as people are able to do those multimodal journeys. You know, the idea that you could ride your bike down, put it on the front of a bus and then get into the city, that idea was not possible for 100 years, but it's becoming possible, and people's journeys being shaped by those apps as well to make that possible. So they're the two things that are changing. The COVID changes, the fact transport itself is changing, and that's exactly the backdrop to the work we're doing up here. It's got to look at those serious infrastructure challenges. I don't want to, we'll be guided by that work, so I can't jump ahead of that. I don't want to pretend that they'll be easy things to solve either. We'll have to carefully work through those, but it'll be guided by this work. And from a state government point of view, the challenges that we've talked about, the housing challenge, the transport infrastructure challenge, you're exactly right in your opening comments, Michael. They go side by side for us because we have to deal with both of those together. They are related. So,
thank you, Michael.
So look, let's wrap up the pre-prepared questions. So essentially, for anyone who wants to take this on, and John, you started to share yours then. But what is the vision for the future of traffic and transport on the Northern Beaches? Because if the Premier calls me one more time to say, "Where's my minister?" Over to you, or Marjorie. What's the vision? What do you think the vision for the future of traffic and transport is for the beaches? What you've heard tonight, you've heard of plans for this.
E-trams, for example, electric trams. Can we really start to see
Trackless
some
trams.
progress?
Oh, I reckon there's a future there.
It is one of those things that's interesting with the discussion tonight is, I don't know how well aware people are even of those, the impact more and more cars have on the efficient operation of the buses getting through the bus lanes, the priority at the traffic lights. I think an an education campaign is probably long overdue in understanding the consequences of your choices.
Yeah. No, look, I think that's a really good point. Yeah, well, look, I've probably started to answer that question. The big other thing I'd highlight is this area has led the way, and it got touched on earlier, led the way on the electrification. Electric vehicles, electric bikes, and we have to do far better as a government in supporting that change. A lot of that is about the charging infrastructure, and that's really where we're trying to take things. But the good thing about these congestion issues is a small drop in the traffic as you move people onto different modes has a big impact on congestion. So some of those changes that we're starting to talk about how people do move around, could be highly impactful in the future if we can get some of those fundamentals right, including that charging infrastructure for electric vehicles.
Marjorie, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think for us, we want to get more people on buses. I started by saying this. Buses are the best bang for your buck when it comes to growing that kind of transport infrastructure. It is much better bang for your buck than a metro or a train. And so we are really committed to growing it. One of the really important next pieces that we're working on is a route-by-route analysis across the entire state, and that's going to be happening here as well, where we're going through each and every route to see how efficient, how effective they are, which are the ones that need more, are there ones where there's less people using them, where are the areas that are being missed out, how do we redesign them? This is a huge piece that we're working on, but it's a really important part of this, and the passenger forums are a fundamental part of that. And as I said, making sure that the community is part of the decision making. As I said, we know we've got really in-depth information now because of the passenger forums from people to know what suburbs have missed out, where do people want to go, and that's going to be part of our key decision making moving forward.
Can I say, I'm sure Michael's received plenty of emails. As a federal member, I've gotten a lot of emails in relation to bus route changes that occurred a couple of years ago where, you know, there's misses in terms of the exchanges, the connections, the where the routes are, the congestion, parking. So that community consultation is incredibly important. I can't stress that enough because it was incredibly problematic, the changes that occurred in the last couple of years.
Yeah, and I'll reiterate this, which I said at the beginning. I think one of the real key findings for me, and I think from the task forces and the passenger forums as well, was the need for ongoing community consultation with communities about public transport. Again, I was also one of those communities that had 36 bus routes changed in the middle of the night, and people woke up and the bus stop didn't exist, and people were like, what? And so this, I think for us, that is one of the key principles of this, is embedding ongoing community consultation and engagement with how we design transport.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. I think what's really important is we've talked about the housing and making sure that goes hand in glove, retaining drivers, ensuring we get additional drivers. Even if we move, the population will grow. There is no secret. Our population on the Lord's Beaches is predicted to grow to about 277,000 now. I think it's due to be 330 within the next 20 years. So our population will grow. That's more people on buses. So even if we get things like what I mentioned before, trackless trams, which are, you know, you only need one driver for two buses, you still need more drivers. They're not out of jobs, they still need more drivers. And so how do we retain them? How do we attract them? How do we, so that's really key to that, because as one of the original architects of the V1, we knew that it was going to work. and now the bus task force is being, one of the recommendations is everyone gets a B1 because everyone starts to move to that B1 transport, which means John has to design different roads in different ways. The metro is changing things which we don't quite understand yet, or which is good. People are moving onto it. So maybe people will do the Killarney and the Forest to Chatswood, get off and get onto a train straight to, I think it goes to, Pyrmont and then Wynyard, etc., whatever it is, or Martin Place. But it's a lot quicker. They will do that. And we need to make that attractive, and we need to make and to design around it. So I think housing affordability, hand in glove, has to happen. Electric vehicles are happening, and Northern Beaches was the fastest take up. And we've got a guy in the room who's solved the problem. Merrick from Alchemy Charge is in the room tonight. He's the one I've just been telling the world about. Anyone who's in an old unit block who's got a PowerPoint can now plug in their car and the strata body doesn't get charged for the use of it. It goes straight to the person who's plugging it in. He's got the technology. We need to roll that out, and because he's basically monetised that PowerPoint. So everything's doable. Everything's changing, and there's disruptors. E-bikes are a great thing, although we have to find a solution to how do we educate kids and adults not to keep them plugged in overnight. Sadly, we had a house burned down in Arowina last night, which is awful. It's just terrible. So we need to make sure that we face those problems and be honest about them. And whether technology can help there. Merrick, can you just solve that one? So yeah, I just want to see that happen, and I just want to throw, I think we're going to wrap up now. And do you want to, Mathew, add your final words?
Well, you raised the issue about vision. So I think it's important for us to understand that right now we are on the cusp of one of the most fundamental changes in human history that we will ever see, and that is electricity prices have moved to be negative during the day. So right now, the electricity companies are trying to get people to stop producing more solar energy than we can currently use. So if you happen to have a shop and you want to put on a solar panel and offer free electric vehicle charging to your customers, that's now a possibility. The idea that we could go from spending hundreds of billions of dollars a year, like we have spent trillions of dollars over the last 2 decades on importing foreign oil, and right now the sunniest country in the world can move to having electric bikes, cars, buses, and Brisbane is deploying double articulated electric buses, which are kind of like the trackless trams but a bit different. We can go to that and stop paying foreign countries for oil and run our cities in a clean, green way just by changing how we think and start looking at daytime charging. So the opportunity here for a wonderful, clean, green future is just waiting for us to seize it.
Well, yeah, you've got my agreement there. And we have finally passed fuel efficiency standards in Parliament, in the federal Parliament, so that will hopefully incentivise cleaner vehicles being imported into Australia since we don't have a domestic car industry. Now, we have got some questions. Is Minister okay to stay a bit longer, or do you have to head off?
I'm going to have to head
Shortly. We do have some...
You want to put to me straight up, I'm happy to...
Well, I think this is probably a one that you can go to you. John from Neutral Bay has submitted the question of, can public transport go back to government ownership? There's an easy one, sorry.
Well, it's a very good question, because part of the issue has been the complexity of having services privatised and then government losing control of being able to actually set the standards. Some of these contracts are very long-term contracts, so it has been a big challenge when it comes to government being able to have the appropriate control and respond to citizens. So, yeah, well, we won't be. I don't expect, having spent all day sorting through the budget. We've got big financial challenges in New South Wales. We'll be building new schools and building new hospitals before we're buying back the public transport. But I think we've also been very upfront about some of the concerns that privatisation has led to, and it's been a problem in the bus network. From my point of view, it's been a problem on the toll roads. This has been a big, certainly up here you've faced the challenge with the hospitals, yeah. So look, we are taking the a track away from privatisation, but I also want to be upfront that we'll be building hospitals, building schools before we're buying back transport.
Police stations, airports.
Yeah, I'll add a couple of things. So we're not in the business of tearing up the contracts, but the task force has looked at what would happen if particular regions fell over, and there are a number of regions that have been underperforming, and so in that case, whether or not the STA would be re-established then. But again, we'll be completely upfront with you. When the last government got rid of the last public operators, the STA really is the shell. It isn't. There is no one that works there. It is just an organisation by name. So the process of re-establishing the STA is incredibly complex. So this idea that you would just, firstly, we're not going to tear up contracts, right? That wouldn't. We as a government require private investment into our state, and that would not give our government any certainty for that private. Well, look, but this is why we made a commitment to say that there would be no more privatisation. We know it doesn't work, right? Yeah. So, but anyway, as I've said, this is something that has been looked at in it, and as I said, in the instance where some fall over, this is one of the things we're looking at.
And look, what's good is we've got a private operator who can hear from the room what everyone's, where we want things to work well. But Minister, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, look, I will have to run at that point, but I just want to say thanks for the discussion. To have this sort of forum convened in this way and to hear direct is hugely valuable from my point of view. So we've got some work to do at our end doing that analysis, and we'll make sure that people know what's going on. But I just want to say thanks from my end. Also to have the transport team here to hear direct as well is really valuable from our end.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. I'll see the Seagulls game and then Brookvale afterwards tomorrow.
Well, we've got Marjorie for a little bit longer. I think I will go to... We've got a number of questions that have been submitted. Can we electrify our buses sooner? They're environmentally friendly and quieter, from Stephen in Mossman.
Yeah, so I think the starting point is I think all of us would have liked this to have happened yesterday. It is nowhere near happening at the pace that we want it to happen. I have to say, you're incredibly lucky in your region. I think it's rolling out much faster here than it is anywhere else. The pace in which we're doing this is also to fit and to ensure that the industry is being supported along the way as well. We've got commitments around building these buses here in New South Wales, so we need to make sure that they are supported and that they have guaranteed purchasing over and sustainable purchasing over a very long time. So part of what we're doing is we're working with them as well. So.
Now, I'll also do a plug, and Michael and I are aligned on this project of we want them locally powered local electric buses. So obviously the idea of also electrifying for example, the Brookvale bus depot with the local Brookvale area from like an urban microgrid, essentially, to be powering them locally would be that extra benefit. So that's a project and I have been talking to Chris Bowen about that project as well. Mark from Brookvale has lodged a question of, has a feasibility study been done on extending the Sydney Metro from Chatswood to Dee Why via Frenchs Forest? And I appreciate the comments earlier around the difficulty that brings when it comes to also densification and urban requirements to do that. But
yeah, so I think and I think the Minister was sort of unpacking this a little bit more, is that the future transport outlines from Transport New South Wales the visions that are there, and the mass transport connection to Dee Why hasn't been identified on that link, and the immediate priority within the infrastructure and service plan for Greater Sydney, it hasn't been, and there's no current plans. So our priority is really around the buses at this point in time and getting people into other modes of public transport.
There was a historical analysis done by the Sydney Metro Corporation back in 2008 when they were looking at the Western Metro. They identified it as a high priority corridor as one that would be the most impactful, actually more impactful than the Western corridor. The real problem is, again, cost. And when we have inflation, projects like this get delayed because they are inflationary. So with the pipeline of all of the construction projects around the country, you have to start slowing down which ones you start doing, and then that pushes the date out. So we may have to wait for Snowy Hydro to the Sydney Metro, the West Connects, the airport. But also it does help if we go from building one metro to building the next metro. So the reason the French are able to keep their prices down is they never stop building.
And I'll just add another thing too on that. In the broader planning scheme I've been intimately involved in for too long now, we don't have the infrastructure in terms of sewer and water. There's only so much capacity in that, which is another reason we can't get a very significantly more dense in terms of housing and the like, because we just do not have that infrastructure. Or we can expand it, but at significant cost for little benefit, which what happens then is they prioritise areas like Western Sydney, which is going under tens of thousands of dwellings per sort of suburb, like Wollondilly with 25,000, I think, just in one little area with a 2-lane road no bigger than Mona Vale Road. So that's where some of the priorities are going, and the airport we mentioned as well. So, but our physical infrastructure, and then having to get the other things like fire and rescue and the infrastructure surrounding that, the roads, it just doesn't cope. So I think we've kind of missed out because of historical reasons, and we're going to be a far lower priority. So it's kind of better we focus on what we've got and what we can get and maximise that potential.
I think if two more questions, that would be great.
I touched on this before about Wynyard Station. I mean, I've raised it with the Minister and stuff. There's one of the options I put forward, and probably shouldn't say it in front of the Mayor of Mosman, but especially Mayor of North City, doesn't matter. Neutral Bay, and can we eliminate during the PM the Neutral Bay stop from Wynyard? So if you use the B line it stops at one stop. First stop is at Neutral Bay there. During the PM peak Monday to Friday, over 2,500 people get off on that stop. Just from that's a lot of people in the line, in the queue. So that lessens the queue a little bit, but it also makes the trip home faster. So we've proposed that, and we know there's a supplementary bus that does one stop from Wynyard, but it doesn't go from Wynyard. So do we look at doing something like that? We've got to discuss that with the operators, with the transport and stuff. But fundamentally, the infrastructure around there does need to change because it is a nightmare, and it is on your radar, I know.
Mathew from French's Forest has asked for what are the planned solutions for Belrose French's Forest area, which, Michael, very dear to you as well. It would be good to understand also that axis and what are the solutions for that area.
In what regard, solutions for Belrose French's Forest? Is that the planning?
That's
She
Mathew.
says solutions. I mean,
what solutions are planned for
we're
Belrose
certainly,
French's
in
Forest
terms
area?
of transport, we've definitely been seeking that we get the infrastructure like the B line has through Forest Way and down Warringah Road, so that the customer experience is 100 times better. We certainly we know the technology is coming to fix the app, which does not work. It is just false. It is incorrect. French's Forest, the X160 bus is designed to be the next B line bus. So it's designed to be upgraded and increased in capacity to be able to take on board the dwellings that will happen quickly around French's Forest. We know there's a couple of developments going up there now under construction, and there'll be more very soon. So it's designed, and depending on where the government and council land with the additional planning controls, the medium density stuff, we'll see and the housing strategy and how it relates to the Northern Beaches Council housing strategy. So that will be all factored into how quickly they can turn that infrastructure on. So that's what's happening.
So we've also got someone here from Transport for New South Wales who's been working on this.
Great.
Thank you. Matt Lynch from Transport, and thanks for the opportunity to be part of today. It's actually really good to actually hear some of the issues and obviously some of the frustration that's coming through. It helps us to understand and then respond. So particularly around Belrose, Michael has raised this personally as part of the engagement of the review that we're undertaking. So we've talked today a little bit around the obviously the challenges around bus shortages and driver shortages. And there are always constant changes and tweaks to the network. So in March, earlier this year, there were a few changes to the bus services. They have led to an overall improvement, so an improvement in performance at a high level, and also, I guess importantly, a reduction in cancellations that we're observing for those buses that are feeding that Belrose Preggers Forest area, which is a positive. Obviously, there's still more work to be done, and we're looking to engage with the community on further changes going forward, particularly when we try and unlock opportunities with Metro opening in the middle of the year. There will be looking at further changes to align, I guess, trying to realise some of those travel time savings. I won't quote the 20 well, but they're certainly a lot faster from Chatswood. There are obviously some constraints in making changes and things like that, so it's a process to work through, but we're getting there. And then historically, obviously, there was the works that were supported around the Northern Beaches Hospital that improved capacity for French's Forest and Belrose and access to Warringah Road. As part of the review, we are looking at Warringah Road, and a key focus area is around that interchange. So we're looking to try and identify some of those opportunities as we track towards a commitment to return to government later this year.
And don't forget the on-demand transport that I keep begging you for.
I know Marjorie has to go, but I just wanted to quickly, obviously at a federal level, we're very focused from an NDIS point of view with the changes coming, but there is a concern, and it's a question that's been lodged by a Brookvale resident around what consideration's been given to improving transport options for disabled passengers, because that is a key component of public transport.
So I think, firstly, in the last budget, we committed over $800 million to the disability program, so people should know that. It's something that we care about. Even with the task force, we've been specifically engaging with disability advocacy groups, specifically around buses, partner networks and areas, and having people sit at the table to say, how do we use and improve those services, so they are there as part of it.
Is that 1 year?
Pardon?
How much is it for? How long is that?
The money is a one-year contract.
That was in the last year budget. That was it in the last year budget, and I'm happy to send you all of these to.
I'll follow up with some more queries on this.
I can put all of these. I think and so we're working with disability advocacy groups as well around this, particularly even things like signage, to make sure that signage is fit for purpose for people with disabilities. The other bits and pieces as well, there's a huge training piece that we've been working on with drivers around their requirements to put ramps down. We've got things we're working on, not just in terms of public transport, but in terms of, I'm going to use, I can't find the word in my head, but for taxis and for taxis and Ubers, ride shares, around their requirements to allow blind or those with disability and dogs to allow in. That's a huge piece that we've been working on as well. So a lot is happening. And yeah, I'm happy to send you all of those notes to see what we're doing. But I get what I need to say. We know that much more needs to be done. There's a huge disability program in terms of our trains and making sure that there are lifts at every single train station. There aren't, and so a priority list has been developed by Transport for New South Wales on them, and they're working through that as well.
And Zali, any funding for caddy transport? Because we've lost caddy. Our community, it was disability transport, a community provider. They've had to fold because they couldn't get volunteer drivers, so they're going to rely on EasyLink. It'd be great to help somehow the federal partnership with state on something like increasing funding for community transport. They do like close to 100,000 trips a year, and now we've lost one of the major providers in caddy, which is awful. So I think we kind of need to advocate and see how we can work together on that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. I know you have to run, so I want to thank you, but we still have...
One question. Can you make the bus safe for dogs? Because every time you go around the curve, I go over the slide.
And that, yeah, the service dogs, it is an issue that's been raised with me. I've raised it at federal level, that making sure that public transport, that people know that service dogs are allowed on, but also safer for them.
He slides in the curve. So you need to have proper or something.
So that's something to consider. We will follow that up, and there's plenty of questions on notice that we can follow up with everyone. Michael and I will work on it. Thank you so much for making it out to the Northern Beaches.
Thanks, Marjorie.
Now, I'm conscious of time, and you've all been. It's been really interesting and engaging. But Mathew, I guess
I don't have a life, so go for it.
But I guess, look, for a lot of people, it's that question of vision of the future in terms of, is it trackless trams? What is happening around the world? We hear of international cities where they're no longer having, for example, cars are not allowed within CBDs. There are, sort of exclusion zones, essentially. Is that where we really need to start to get our mind to?
Well, it was really funny when I was talking to a WestConnex forum about the impacts of the Rozelle interchange, and Anthony Albanese comes in and he says, "Oh, well, we've got to worry about the cost of congestion, and all of these problems of congestion." And then a few years later, we have COVID and we have no congestion, and everybody's freaking out that there's no congestion because cars don't matter; it's people that matter. Whether a person is walking or wheeling to the shops, they're the ones making the purchases. They're the ones who are engaging in the social aspects, and they're the people who are, trying to access their friends and doctors and schools and all the rest of it. So having a transport system focused on moving cars, which is what the current guidelines are, the level of service are the volume to capacity ratio of cars, the time waiting for cars at an intersection, not the time waiting for humans at the intersection. So in that way, it actually, the traffic engineers are measuring and being assessed on whether or not they are getting the most cars through the intersection. So if a bus is sitting there waiting for, minutes, they're getting an A-grade mark because they're moving a heap of cars. So what's happening around the world is that most of the big cities, Paris, London, New York, all of the Scandinavian ones, even Brussels, one of the most car-centric cities in the world, has gone, we can't build enough car capacity to solve the traffic problem. So we have to start focusing on moving people. And also changing it so people don't need to drive halfway across the city to get a doctor's appointment. So that's about making sure services are local, and it is described often in the literature as there's Machete's constant. Is people will travel about half an hour. Beyond that, people will do it, but half an hour is the sweet spot. So making sure that people can get everything they need within half an hour, half an hour's walk, cycle, bus ride, car trip, that's how we need to do it. But we also need to start looking at the fact that in terms of climate change, we are really pushing our luck here, people. So we really need to electrify things and get to decarbonise our transport system really quickly, because Australia's cumulative transport emissions are more than New Zealand's entire transport emissions just since 1990 alone. In 1 year, we emit more transport emissions than African countries have emitted in their entire history. We are an incredibly dirty country. We have the 16th largest polluter in cumulative emissions on the planet. Tiny Australia. That is frankly shocking. When I saw that, I was amazed. And we actually don't have the time, because of the systemic impacts, to wait. So if we start looking at moving people instead of cars, then we can focus on things like public transport priority at traffic lights, big red bus lanes, double articulated buses, whether you trackless trams are very similar. They're almost the same, except the trackless trams are from a tram manufacturer. So the double articulated electric buses that they're deploying in Brisbane, they're a big thing. There are 150 people per bus, and getting those moving on the main roads getting nice, brightly lit public transport stops which have a lot of active users around them so that women feel safe getting off at night. None of this is new. Like, there was a question that was raised, a debate we had at the Australian Transport Research Forum like 3 years ago, which was, is there anything new in transport? And the answer is, no, we have all of the technology. We just need to deploy it. The new solid-state batteries that are just starting to come onto commercialisation this year, they may be a game changer, but almost everything else is just a matter of political will, and that's also a matter of you, the public, making noise and making sure that every party, not just your independents and your local MPs, but also the other parties and the ministers in Canberra, know that you want them to invest in a clean, human-focused future. And then that's just a matter of making it so it's safe and delightful to walk. There's places to sit, shade, and we also embrace and support the diverse people in our community, those who have accessible needs like service dogs, guide dogs, wheelchairs, canes.
Don't call it diverse, call it the community.
The community, yes. Yeah, we're all different. And incontinence, it is something that people don't like to talk about and don't like to think about, but one of the big barriers to public transport use, and it's just ignored, is the fact that a lot of older people can't stand and wait at a bus stop for too long because they need to be able to go to the toilet at a moment's notice. Yeah.
Zali?
So, obviously, I don't know if that's the note we want to finish on.
Oh, well, there's a couple of... incontinence. I'm very conscious of time, but we've got an engaged audience, and there's a couple more questions that are quick to answer from the audience that I've got on here. Can I canvass? I'd like to hear or canvass what support there is to rapid transport to Manly Wharf to encourage more people to commute to the city by ferry and reduce road congestion. Great question, Mel from Balgowlah. I can tell you that it's definitely been canvassed before in my time as mayor. We looked at some of the challenges that would happen. So if you took the Pittwater Road from Harris Farm down to the wharf, unless you want to get rid of 2 lanes of parking, it ain't going to work. Otherwise, you're just massively congested and you can't get down there in any particular quick fashion. So there was a challenge that you'd have to overcome politically and I guess with the residents themselves in particular. But it was definitely canvassed. But also, it's 20 minutes, 22 minutes, I think, direct on the fast ferry and 25 now on the one ferry, 30 minutes on the slow ferry. But it's, for me personally, I catch the B line every day to Parliament. It's between 35 and 40 minutes from DY to Wynyard on the B1. And that's on any day. It's not a particular day. It's at 7:30 in the morning. I can get on it at 7:30. Sometimes I'm standing, but as I said, they've added 160 services in the last few weeks, and they're starting them at different points. But it's at capacity. We actually need more buses. We need more drivers. That's a known factor because it is that popular. So you're spot on. So yes, it has been canvassed, and I'm happy to. You should continue to raise it. Maybe there's certain pockets where it could be done. I don't know, but will it be quicker? I don't think so. But it's a much nicer ride. My wife much prefers to do it.
And we might...
The electric vehicle? I was just going to say the electric vehicle.
I think we've covered a lot of the topics in the various points of discussion, but I'm conscious that if you have more questions or more issues, I'm just conscious of time and obviously for everyone, but we are very engaged. I've got many people from my office here. We can take questions, take it on notice, and we will endeavour to follow up both at state and federal. You've now heard we can both be very good pests at all level to get some answers as much as we can get. I mean, I appreciate sometimes there's frustration that you can't get exactly the answer you want, but we are raising the concerns and making sure they're doing the work to come up with some solutions. It's not always as straightforward or the one you're wanting, but at the very least making sure that they are very conscious at all levels, and especially with Transport being here. They've heard your concerns, and we will continue to push that forward. But I think this is probably a good point to wrap up, Michael.
Sure.
Can I just thank you all for coming?
Yes, exactly.
Thank you, everybody.
You took the words out of my mouth.
I honestly,
Thank you all for coming.
I'm really thrilled to see people actually actively engaged in a public meeting.
Absolutely, so good.
It's nice to be back to a point where we can see this.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.